Welcome everyone to Meditation Mount. Delighted that you could join us. We're gathered from different parts of the world, and we're gathered at a very auspicious time in the history of our humanity, as well as in the evolutionary history of Gaia. This seems to be a critical time. So before we go into today's exploration, let's just gather ourselves, bring ourselves together, and create a cohesive and receptive field together. And we do this simply by becoming aware of our breathing, slowing it down so our breathing is in rhythm with the beat of our heart. And we release any tensions that may be held within our physical body. Let go of any emotions that may be swirling. And release any extraneous thoughts so that we stand together as a clear and receptive field. And we build this field by joining heart to heart to heart, visualizing streams of lighted, loving energy connecting us, weaving together this matrix that is our community and our communion. Let's sense the power and presence of this group field. Thank you. Well, as you know, world leaders are gathering in Glasgow, Scotland for COP26, attempting to address the pending climate disaster with its dire consequences for all life on Earth. And we are gathering here today online to explore the more subtle dimensions of creating and maintaining a healthy and toxin-free environment within our own universe of self. So our brief journey today will cover techniques for staying clean, insights into what will help create a healthy psychological climate, and some simple tips on spiritual first aid. So I've prepared a few notes and I have some slides, and we'll be guided in the moment by what is the sense need. And the length of this session could vary. It really determines on what is being called forth. It could be anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes. I believe we're living in an age of plan and adapt. We have an idea of what we want to do, we plan it, and then when we're inside it, we make adjustments, make changes, and we adapt. I also want to cover quite a bit of ground, but I don't want to overwhelm us. I don't want us to get, if you like, spiritual indigestion. So we'll have some breathing time inside of this. However, before we enter the world of techniques and tips, let's begin at the beginning with an experience 50 years ago that I had that gave birth to the concept of the universe of self and radically shifted my understanding and relationship with this earthly vehicle called Michael. So I was attending a spiritual retreat in Denmark, and one of the mentors took me aside because they noticed that I needed some help. And they delivered a message that changed my life. They asked me, did I believe in a creator? And I said, yeah, of course. Of course. Duh. Well, came the reply, have you ever considered that in the same way that you look to a greater presence as a source of guidance in your life, the many lives that make up who you are look to you as their source of guidance and well-being. You are the God of your universe, the steward of an inner world. It stopped me in my tracks. I had actually never considered the awesome responsibility that each soul has taken on for the care of the universe of self. And so, without going into too many details, I immediately ceased ingesting harmful and addictive substances into my world and decided that I would take up my responsibility as being a wise steward of my own universe of self. And then 4 years later, while preparing to deliver a course at the Findhorn community in Scotland, where I lived for 14 years, this experience I had in Denmark inspired a particular drawing that I'd like to show you now. Very basic. And I was asking the question, or putting forward the supposition, suppose the planets are organs in the solar body. Could humanity be a vital organ in the body of planet Earth? And what if inside each one of us there is a whole universe? My God, is everything alive? So I offer that as just as an encapsulation of the aha I had. And the reason I mention it is because what I'd like to start with is to take a time for us to get in touch as the soul with our own universe of self, and to either establish or re-establish a deeper relationship with it. Because if this is true, there are many lives looking to us to be a wise being who stewards their lives. So once again, let's take a few deep breaths. Go back inside the stillness of the heart. And sense yourself as a wise and loving steward of your universe. And take a look around on different levels. What is part of this universe? The blood, the bones, the cells, but also the more refined atoms, the emotions, the thoughts, the intelligences that take care of your daily life. The angelic presences that bring harmony. Take time to realize that inside of you there is a whole universe for which you are responsible, for which you have stewardship. This may be a practice that you've done before, or this may be the first time you've consciously acknowledged the many lives that make up your own universe of self. So maybe you want to take some time just to send out a blessing to them, say thank you, ask them what they need, reassure them that all is well, they are not forgotten. That there is a being who cares and holds them in deep love. So this is something you can continue to deepen yourself over time. For me, it's a daily practice. It takes a few minutes. I check in with myself each day to say thank you that another day is here, and this amazing universe of self is allowing me, as the incarnated agent of the soul, to be here on this planet. And I actually have a relationship with what I would call a basic self, like the project manager of daily activities. And I often ask, how's it going? What do you need? It may say, I need a little bit more space. We need to breathe a bit more. Or sometimes it will say, go buy some beetroots. And the more one tunes in to this universe, the more one has this resonant relationship, and we know what its needs are and we can meet its needs. So I simply invite you to develop your own relationship with your inner self, because nobody else is going to take care of it. As Oscar Wilde said, be yourself. Everyone else is taken. So the only God to the universe of self is us. So let's gently move into some of the things that we can do to stay clean. There are absolutely a million things that we could list here. The obvious things we can do. We can exercise regularly, breathe clean air as much as possible, utilize energy healing practices such as Reiki. These are the obvious things that we know about. It's also important to have a healthy diet that meets our specific needs and causes no harm to the lives within our own universe of self or within the greater ecosystem of Gaia. And more people are exploring things like veganism as a way of living in right relationship and maintaining both personal and planetary health. But all of this is a personal choice. And my role today is not to be prescriptive, tell you what you should do, could do, but simply to offer a space where we can each reevaluate how we are choosing to exercise the gift of freedom, coupled with responsibility in being the steward of our own universe of self. So we could spend actually a whole session exploring feng shui or sacred geometry, because keeping a clean house, both outer and inner, is vital. When we understand that taking care of our surroundings to make sure that they are clean and orderly is really important, something shifts. And when I use the word orderly, I don't just mean neat and tidy. By orderly, I refer to the harmony of forms as prescribed by feng shui, and the harmony of the spheres, as in sacred geometry. Because if we can create and recreate on the outside the natural patterns of inner harmony that exist in the universe, then our environment supports us. And I think all of us have experienced a messy and disorderly space attracts corresponding chaotic psychic energies. So it's all about learning to live according to the law of resonance and the practice of harmony through loving kindness and harmlessness. I had an example of this about 15 years ago. I was asked to go and work with a company, and the CEO had a fairly large apartment in the city that he used to overnight when he was busy, but also where they had meetings. And he said, well, let's go there, a couple of hours beforehand, and then we can get ready for the meeting. I was meeting with his executive team. And as he opened the door, I got this really weird feeling. I thought, oh gosh. And I walked in, there were papers scattered all over the floor, and in the kitchen there were dishes, a week's worth of dishes, and old food lying around. And I said to him, look, I think it would really be helpful if we were to clean up a bit. I'd love to lend you a hand. Let's do it. And so we spent the next hour and a half cleaning everything, putting everything in order so that when the team arrived, they came into an environment that held them, that was cohesive, that was harmonious. And the person said, well, I just didn't have the time and I let it pile up. And I said, I know, I understand. However, if we're going to do good work together, we have to make sure there is harmony on all levels. That includes making sure that the physical environment is clean as well. So it's more than just teenagers being told by their parents, clean up your room. We're talking about whatever we create on the outside is a pattern, and that pattern has a particular frequency. That frequency, through the law of resonance, then opens up a door for like frequencies. So if we've got chaos and rotting food, guess who the guests are going to be who come through that doorway? So that's the importance of being orderly. And remember the old saying of cleanliness is next to godliness. I don't think this was some puritanical statement. I really believe it was understanding that by keeping things, if you like, clean and not distorted, then we come into resonance with a deeper level of harmony. So there are many things we can do, and I encourage actually you to conduct your own research on what is possible, because we could spend the next hour going through 100 different tips of what to do. For example, if you research the Agni Yoga teachings, you may come across a sloka that says, any cut flowers brought into the house should be immediately removed when they begin to wilt, as the natural process of breaking down the form attracts those beings tasked with decomposition. And we as souls are tasked with composition, not decomposition. We are tasked with composition, the composing and creating of a healthy world where the potential and promise of the future can flower. So our focus today will be on the inner dimensions of cleanliness, understanding the power and wisdom contained within the phrase, energy follows thought. This is an ancient maxim, and it is the key to all inner work. Energy follows thought. So we will be learning to focus our life energy wisely, which in the Agni Yoga teaching is called psychic energy, or you know it as chi, or life force. But before we do that, let me return briefly to the wake-up call in Denmark that I described a few minutes ago. At the time of that wake-up, I was reading the Essene Gospel of Peace, which is an ancient manuscript that was found in the Vatican Library. It's a really wonderful document and purported to come from the Master Jesus' teaching about how to live in harmony with the laws of nature. Now, this book contained directions for a fast. And because I'd just woken up and taken responsibility, I decided to undertake a spiritual detox. And this involved fasting and calling upon the spirits of fire, air, water, and earth to cleanse and purify my body and prepare an abode for a greater spirit to enter. And it was a week-long ritual, and it involved, as I say, invoking the angels of the sun, the angels of air, the angels of water, while standing in the ocean, and calling upon them to help me cast out the devils, as it says in the book. But these devils represented the unredeemed and impure aspects of myself. It wasn't some invasive force. So why I mention this is because spiritual hygiene is not a method of protecting us from life. It's a practice and daily discipline to create and maintain the highest degree of wholeness possible so that we can engage and be of greater service as the incarnated agent of the soul. So let's delve into this some more and explore how our various states of being, our various moods, not only affect us psychologically, but also determine our physical well-being. So let's take a look at some emojis. I picked emojis because they sort of encapsulate in a symbol the energy. So we'll start with the negative and then I'll focus on the positive ones. Whenever we have anger and irritation, it produces harmful precipitates that create acidic conditions in our body. And these weaken the immune system, opening a door for illness. And in Agni Yoga, it talks about irritation creating imperil. So even though we get irritated and get angry, it's a self-defeating emotion because it doesn't make things better. Although it's nice to it feels good to rant and rave occasionally and discharge. However, it doesn't produce what is needed to overcome the situation. And the second one here is doubt and despair. So doubt and despair undermine our ability to connect with the life-giving energies of the soul that ultimately stymies the circulation of health-producing qi throughout our system. So doubt and despair is like a downer. You can feel it. And when you go down, you lose touch with the positive life-giving force. And when the qi stops flowing, that's when water stops circulating, it becomes stagnant. And then the third emotion, we could have chosen a whole number of them, but I just chose these three. Fear and cowardice freeze and rob our energies, cutting off inspiration and disconnecting us from the power of the indwelling sovereignty of the soul. And it's said in the Ageless Wisdom teachings that fear is like a blanket on the creativity of the human spirit, like a wet blanket. It dampens. So every time we have fear, it cuts us off from the power of who we are, disconnects us from the power of the indwelling sovereignty of the soul. Okay. Now let's focus on some positive ones. Joy. So joy and heart-centered laughter actually oxygenate the blood. They lift the spirits and they greatly strengthen the immune system, which is key. It's the immune system that allows us to maintain a healthy ecosystem. And joy is a quality of the soul. And when we live the qualities of the soul, we are healthy. We're whole. And Roberto Assagioli, who was the inspiration behind Meditation Mount, and I'll refer to him several times during the course of this broadcast, he was a great proponent of joy. He wrote a wonderful paper called Smiling Wisdom. But his thing was joy is how love and gratitude just flow out of us. And I think we've all experienced this. When we're joyful, somehow we feel lighter. Gratitude, this is key. Gratitude brings us into resonance with the abundance of life and opens up a space for grace so that we can fully enter into life and life can enter into us. Eileen Caddy at Findhorn, where I lived, was very, very keen on gratitude. Gratitude creates a greater sense of wholeness and well-being and then allows the qi, the life force, to flow and circulate freely throughout the universe of self. So once again, the hallmark of a healthy system is right circulation, free circulation of the qi. Anytime it's blocked by a belief, by an emotion, then we get a disconnect. And when the circulation is cut, that's when disease and disease set in. And the third example I've chosen is serenity. When we come into that place of sereneness, which is really another soul quality, standing above the fray, serenity releases natural calming chemicals into our body so that our energy field is kept clean and clear, and we're able to stand poised and unaffected by outer conditions. The reason I wanted to mention this is because we are very focused on cleaning up the physical planet. It's polluted. We know the amount of plastic in the oceans. We know the amount of chemicals in the soil and the pollutants in the atmosphere. But cleaning up, if you like, the psychological climate of the world is really important, particularly cleaning up the astral plane. I believe it's one of our group tasks. So let me say a little bit more about what I mean by cleaning up the astral plane. Most of our humanity is focused and lives their lives on the emotional and lower mental plane. There's no judgment in that. That's just a fact. Most people live and are governed by their emotions and their thoughts. This is where we reside energetically as a humanity. And the plane that houses the emotions is the astral plane. In its own right, it is a plane of sensitivity and light. It's the lower correspondence to the intuitive or Buddhic plane. And because it's the house where most humans live, guess what? Over the years, we've unfortunately trashed this residence and we've spray painted the walls with crass graffiti. So there's nothing wrong with the astral plane. It's just because we've lived there and we've made a mess of our own house. We've soiled our own nest. Probably the only species that does that. So what I'd like to do is invite us to begin the work of clearing, refining, and raising the emotional content of our lives to a higher level. We can also help with the physical cleanup of the planet. I also believe, because we have the knowledge, we have the capacity, that it's our task to help with the cleanup of the other levels, the emotional level, the lower mental level. And so I'm going to invite us to use a somewhat advanced technique for clearing and raising the emotions. And this meditation was given to Roberto Assagioli, who I said was the inspiration behind Meditation Mount, and also the founder of psychosynthesis, given to him by his teacher, the Tibetan, also known as the Master DK. So let me read this exercise, and then we'll go through it. And in fact, the technique needs to be done 3 times. So just familiarize yourself with it. Focus yourself in the head, sound the Om as the soul, which means inaudibly, and believe that contact has been made between the soul, mind, and brain. Then see yourself as focused esoterically upon the mental plane on the inner, and from the angle of the soul, and then exoterically in the brain. So there's this connection between the mental plane and the brain. Then inhale deeply, drawing the breath up from the solar plexus in the spine, and seeing that upward moving breath carrying the solar plexus energy up the spine into the head after passing it through the heart, and then believe that this takes place. And in the interlude between inhalation and exhalation, dedicate the energy thus withdrawn by the soul, believing in its consequence and subsequent transmutation. And here it gives a description. Transmutation is the changing of one vibration and one vibratory activity into another and higher one. And then during exhalation, in which the breath is carried out on the Om sounded inaudibly, breathe the solar plexus energy, now focused in the head, to the throat center. This should produce increased creative output for humanity. So we're helping lift these emotions up and put them through this, if you like, recycling unit. That's our higher aspects can recycle the lower aspects. And then the final part is, in the following interlude, after exhalation, go over in your mind pictorially, just have an image of what you've just done, a recapitulation. And we'll do this 3 times. So I wanted just to get you familiar with, there are techniques for helping with planetary cleanup on the emotional level. And this is a very powerful one. So let's prepare to do this, and we'll do it 3 times, and I'll use a minimum of words to guide us. So focus yourself in the head center. Sound the Om as the soul. And believe that contact has been made between soul, mind, and brain. And see yourself as focused esoterically on the mental plane and exoterically in the brain. Then inhale deeply, drawing the breath up from the solar plexus in the spine and seeing that upward moving breath carrying the solar plexus energy up the spine into the head after passing it through the heart. Believe that this takes place. And in the interlude between inhalation and exhalation, dedicate the energy, knowing that it will be transmuted. And now during exhalation, in which the breath is carried on the inaudible Om, breathe the solar plexus energy, now focused in the head, to the throat center, which is the center of higher creativity. And then just recap in your mind, conjure up a picture of what you've just done. And we'll repeat this. Focus in the head. Soul, mind, brain connection. Esoterically focused on the mental plane, exoterically in the brain. Inhale deeply, breathing up from the solar plexus and seeing the upward moving breath carry the solar plexus energy up the spine into the head after passing through the heart. And then dedicate the energy thus withdrawn by the soul, believing in its consequent and subsequent transmutation. And then breathe out with an inaudible Om. Breathe the solar plexus energy focused in the head into the throat center. And then just have a picture in your mind of the steps that you've just gone through. And we do it one final time. Focused in the head, sound the Om as the soul inaudibly, connecting soul, mind and brain. Focused esoterically on the mental plane, exoterically in the brain. Inhale deeply, drawing the solar plexus energy up on the breath, up the spine, through the heart, into the head. Dedicate the energy withdrawn, knowing it is being transmuted. And then breathe out on a silent Om. The solar plexus energy focused in the head, breathe it in to the throat center, the center of creativity, knowing that humanity is the throat center of the planet. And then just complete this by holding in your mind a picture of the process and the practice that we have just performed. What I'd like to do, though, is to look at the comments that are made. So here it says, so what you have to realize, this isn't an instant fix. I think that's the important thing to realize with all of this. None of this constitute instant fixes. It requires dedicated work over time. So let's read through what it says here. Repeat this exercise 3 times and do this transference exercise 3 times a day. Do not look for results. So one has to have an attitude of detachment. And here it says, a year's steady work with a detached attitude as to those results will be needed before you yourself will recognize difference of reaction and lessened emotional activities. This exercise, coupled to the group meditation, will, as you will have undoubtedly noted, produce in the long run the linking up of the 3 centers above the diaphragm, the heart, the head, and the throat, which is really ultimately the triangle out of which we work as the liberated human being, as the co-creative agent of Gaia. So this exercise just given is to be done before the group meditation, as it is of the nature of a cleansing exercise. If done properly, it will hasten the results of the group meditation, for it will clear the solar plexus of undesirable emotional force and leave room for reception, as the process is sometimes technically called. So how can we receive in this receptive field new impulses if it's clogged up with all the old detritus of the emotional field? And then it says, true love will then take the place of emotion, and compassion will be substituted for pity. Understanding will take the place of apprehension of suffering. I realize this is a lot to digest, and I appreciate you hanging in there. The reason I wanted to introduce the depth of this material is because the urgency of the times. If we can join together and help out, then let's do so. So one of the things we need to look at is the role of water and fire as purifiers. So hopefully this next image will give you an idea of what we're talking about. There on the left, you've got the purifying waters of therapy or whatever the practice is you're going through that seem to dissolve blockages. So water dissolves things, but fire burns a path for spirit to walk. And it's fire that I want to focus on now, because fire is the greatest cleanser, and it is the path of fire that we are walking. Agni Yoga is the yoga of fire, or the yoga of synthesis, because it focuses on the fire of synthesis. So let me just read with you a quote from Agni Yoga on living fire. This one is taken from the book Heart. You know that the living fire is the most disinfectant remedy, but the nature of fire is the same in all manifestations. The fire of the heart will be a high manifestation of fire. This means that this fire will be the best purifier and protector. Therefore, instead of various dubious and often poisonous antiseptic prescriptions, it is much better not only to have the fire of the hearth, but also to kindle the fires of the heart. It can be proved to what an extent the fires of the heart fight serious illness. Thus, our contemporary physicians will sooner or later have to pay attention to all states of the fires. By barking at the truths long since known, physicians will not reach the panacea. That's a bold statement from Agni Yoga. So what I'd like to talk about now, because it touched on fire as a cleanser, healer, and protector, a disinfectant. I remember when I was living at Findhorn in conversation with Rock. This is R. Ogilvy Crombie. He was the person who was in touch with the nature spirits. He was a trained musician. He was a musician and a magician combined. And I was going traveling, and I wanted to buy some spiritual travel insurance, so I asked Rock to provide the necessary coverage. And he said he was willing to send me off inside a personal protective dome, but he said this would also seal me off from other experiences. And he said what you need to do is develop your own strength, your own inner strength, so that you are your own protection. And this same theme surfaced later while I was studying another meditation practice given, once again, to Roberto Assagioli by his teacher, the Tibetan. And the practice was called the Wheel of Living Fire. And the premise is that radiation of love is the greatest protection. So before I read this, let me just give some background. We can still have this up on the screen. But if you think about how does a clinic maintain a sterile or clean environment where there are no contaminants from the outside, by creating greater air pressure on the inside than exists on the outside. So the same principle applies at subtle levels. The Wheel of Living Fire meditation that we're going to be doing together in a moment provides protection as a result of its primary activity of radiation. The inner power and spiritual pressure at the center is far stronger than the surrounding environment, and therefore no contaminants can enter. In this meditation, we're going to read through it together and then do it. In this meditation, we become the center, we become the point of radiation, we become a causal point. And when we become causal and radiatory, nothing can enter into us. The only thing that can enter into us is something of an equal or higher vibration. No illness, no lower vibration can enter the radiatory force of living fire and the fire of love. So let me go through this. And it's called the Wheel of Living Fire, which burns not, but ever heals. That's the secret. It doesn't fry us, it heals us. So let me read through this, and then we'll do it together. See before you a wheel of fire with 7 spokes. See it immediately before your eyes. Then, by an act of the creative imagination, see yourself standing in the center, at the hub of the wheel. There regard yourself as if you were that hub. So you both become the point of the center and you become the center itself. From that central position, send out 7 streams of living love radiating upon the world. So this is like a healing balm, and it's a blessing we can do to the world anytime. And these 7 rays correspond to the 7 colors of the spectrum. So it's the one light coming through the spiritual prism, the higher triangle, breaking up into these 7. So this is a way of practicing how to be a source of blessing, how to be a source of radiation of love. And in the creative meditation techniques, we talk about sending out blessings as telepathic radiation. And then at the bottom, it says, when you do this, you serve and are at the same time completely protected. This exercise can become instantaneous and effective. It generates a protective force and at the same time makes you a living center of light and love. So let's do this together now. We're beginning to close out this session, and I want us to learn how to stand together as a group at the center. So go back into a meditative space now. Enter the stillness of your inner world and see before you a wheel of fire with 7 spokes. See it immediately before your eyes. Then, by an act of the creative imagination, see yourself standing in the center at the hub of the wheel. There, regard yourself as if you were that hub. And from that central position, send out the 7 streams of living love radiating upon the world. So from the center of our group field, let us send out 7 streams of living love out into the world to bring illumination, healing, Thank you. So without rushing it, I'd like to introduce a couple of more things before we bring this to a close. Today is the Global Day of Action for Climate Justice, and we can participate in this. We can also contribute by addressing the negative psychological climate created by separative thinking and hatred. So what we're beginning to realize is that together we can assume responsibility for the needed planetary cleanup because, as we're discovering, there's a source of pollution and ecological damage very close to home. So in this time together, we've looked at the fact that each derogatory thought or negative emotion generates a poisonous release into the ethers and causes the same destructive effect of the human psyche as harmful chemicals have upon the physical world. And the more we understand about the effects of negative emotions and negative thoughts, we understand that an inner acid rain cloud has been built, and it is a powerful corrosive force that eats away at the social and moral fabric of the world. I'd like to show an image here of why are we doing this healing. We're bringing healing to our world on all levels because the next dispensation being poured forth by the soul of humanity cannot be poured into a broken cup. We cannot receive the gifts of our own collective sovereignty until we've reached a certain degree of wholeness. And I'd like us to do a brief meditation as a way of closing, but before that, I want us to share a message from a good friend, David Spangler. Last week, on November the 1st, David was having a conversation with one of his subtle colleagues. That's just one of his skills. He has conversations with people that we can't see, but are very real to him. And this is what happened. And in the red there, David's comments. As you know, many of the world leaders are gathering right now in Glasgow, Scotland for a climate summit. That being that I call the angel of humanity, or the spirit of humanity, the collective soul of humanity, is overlighting this summit. The request that has been asked of me to pass on is for you to take time to attune not to the summit per se, but to the spirit of creative humanity. So this was a request that was sent out to different spiritual groups around the world. And I thought on this day of global action, let's do this. So let's read the rest of this. This is very important. This is the subtle colleague talking to David and saying, please pass this message on to the humans. This is very important, that you're not attuning to suffering humanity, to humanity that caused these environmental difficulties, to humanity that's the worst side of our nature. You're attuning to the soul of humanity that holds all the possibilities and the creative potentials and the vision that can shape a positive future. And there are 2 more paragraphs that were given to be shared. So let us read the final 2. Humanity has been through this before. This is not the first big crisis of a civilizational nature that humanity has experienced. There's a wisdom in our deep connective knowledge of how to move through these times, and how to do so kind of the way a snake sheds its skin. There are things that will be left behind that we have to get rid of so that something new can emerge. And we have the flexibility and the freedom to grow and to develop new characteristics and capacities. Gaia is growing, and we need to grow with it. There is this wisdom in the soul of humanity that says, okay, this is a stage. We've been through these stages before. There's going to be loss. There's going to be gain. But at the heart of it is this sacred light of our species that has a planetary task, that has a relationship to Gaia that is one of service, and it is seeking to develop and evoke its own sacredness, its own unique way of giving life and expression to its sacred potentials. This is a multi-generational and multi-millennial, if you wish, undertaking. And the most important thing is that whatever happens on the outside doesn't throw us to such a degree that we can't function from the inside. So what I'd like to do is to invite us to go again inside the group heart, to stand there together and to bring ourselves into resonance with the overlighting soul of our humanity, the one soul of humanity of which we are a part. And through an act of love, just bring yourself into resonance with what you perceive to be this great energy field that is the overlighting soul of the one humanity. And inside the soul is the promise and potential of the full glory of who we are as a species, the sacred light, the light that needs to light up the dark places of our own psyche, and the light that will be our contribution to Gaia as Gaia becomes a sacred planet, a planet that radiates light inside the solar family. So let's hold that vision of the soul of humanity and we will be sending out blessings from the soul of humanity. We'll do this with the sound of the Tibetan bell, and we'll send the first wave of love and the power to make wise choices to all those gathered in Glasgow for COP26. So standing in the deep love of the one soul, we send blessings of fiery hope to all at COP26 in Glasgow. And for our second wave of blessings, we send deep love from the heart of hearts, that is the soul of humanity, out to touch all our sisters and brothers around the world, helping each one remember that they are part of the one soul, that they are part of this field of harmony that is the soul of humanity. So let us send out a blessing and see our humanity on earth coming together in fullness. And now we stand, not just as humans, we stand as Gaians. We stand at one with this planetary being in whom we live and move and have our being. And we send deep love from the heart of our one humanity, from the overlighting soul of humanity, to all beings that make up this multi-dimensional ecosystem that we call Gaia. Let us bless Gaia. Thank you. I really appreciate your perseverance and the fact that you're still here. Your presence and participation is really important because it's a group field that we create. And the way that we travel and do our work from now on is in groups. We have to expand the I to become the we, so that the I has a greater sense of self, until eventually we realize that we are the one humanity. So I think with COP26, the wake-up call is it's time to clean up our act on all levels of being. And because we have some insight and some skills, I think we need to step up to the plate and to take on part of the cleansing of the emotional and lower mental fields. First of all, inside ourselves, and then to do it through these various practices that we're familiar with, to help cleanse the greater field. And once we cleanse that field, then there is a suitable residence for the soul to occupy. So thank you once again for your patience, persistence, and perseverance, which were the 3 P's that Peter Caddy would always repeat at Fenhorn. And I would add presence and participation, so there were 5 P's. So as we move into the days and months ahead, let's remain centered no matter what happens on the outside. Technical glitches are nothing. Break down a supply chain, all things that may or may not be happening. Our task is to stay centered and be a point of fiery hope, healing, and blessing to our world. Thank you so much. So goodbye from Meditation Mount. Blessings to everyone.